What do you mean Playzone? Spankings are on butts. I know what a butt is. What more could there possibly be to it? How could anyone possibly mess that up? Well, you'd be surprised. Warning, this video is going to contain footage of a butt, clothed for demonstration purposes. It's all educational and I've worked really hard to not make this into porn. Do you hear that, YouTube overlords? This is strictly educational. So, ask 10 people in the spanking community where they think the appropriate safe zone for spanking is, and you'll probably get 10 different answers. And in some ways, that's how it should be, because the correct answer to that question is wherever the bottom says they are comfortable playing. But mostly I point this out to highlight that this is a topic that has opinions. And while there are certainly some aspects that have right and wrong answers, a lot of this is a matter of opinion. My opinions on it just happen to be pretty strongly held. You'll find that most of my opinions are pretty strongly held. What is the play zone? The play zone is the area of the body that is safe to play on. Essentially, where is the top allowed to hit? For BDSM people, this might be most of the body, while for spankos, it's almost exclusively the butt. You might find that some spankos are willing to play on other areas like their upper back, perhaps the fronts of their thighs, or elsewhere on their legs. But for the purposes of this video, we're just gonna talk about butts. If you were to just ask Vanilla to mark, where is the butt? They might mark somewhere like this. But that is not the play zone. So where the hell is it then? Rule of thumb is that it's the fleshy bit that like hangs off your body, the fatty tissue. The reason that we spank on the butt is because it can take the swats. Your arm, for example, has bones in it that wouldn't really appreciate it very much if you started hitting them. So in general, you're talking about the bit that's muscle and that's fatty tissue that comes away from the body, not on the bone, not on the major nerves, not on the blood supply. Specifically, a few inches below the top of the crack is your high point, down to the crease between your butt and thigh, that's your low point, and then out to where the butt crease with the thigh ends and then goes up from there. This is going to be your main play area. You've got your butt and your undercurve. Below that is the crease or the sit spot. It's what I would call a standard play zone, but it's really sensitive and there might be some people who don't play there. Below that is upper thigh, and below that is just straight up thigh, obviously. Up here doesn't have a specific name that I'm aware of, so we're just gonna call it the top of the cheek. Whether someone likes to play on the top of their thighs and or the tops of their cheeks is subjective, and there's no correct answer. I, for example, never play on the tops of the cheek unless someone asks me to, but I really like tops of thighs. Thighs are a relatively common play zone area for a lot of spankos, but I would say that they're out of the standard area and therefore should be discussed in advance. You can't just go randomly hitting people's thighs without discussing it first, because arguably that's not a spanking anymore. And it's also a pretty surefire way to get yourself yelled at. So in my super weird diagram of Katie's butt here, the green area is your standard good to go play zone with the sit spots marked in yellow. The purple areas are subjective play areas where some people might find them okay and others won't. And honestly, you can likely get away with playing here most of the time and not asking in advance. If a bottom has a preference, they're probably gonna tell you. Blue is thighs, which can be a play zone, but should be discussed in advance, and then red is a no-go zone. For safety reasons, you absolutely never want to be hitting in these areas during a traditional spanking scene. So a couple of quick notes to consider. The first would be body size. These are not absolute figures, they're relative. So for example, on my body, there's a lot more flesh between the end of my play zone and the side of my hip than there is for Katie because I'm larger than Katie. So if you're just thinking about it in terms of absolutes like inches or something, you're likely to go too far on me or not far enough on Katie. But you can see where the crease of my thigh ends, and that's where your guide for width is. So both on my butt and on Katie's butt, you can see where the crease of the thigh ends, go up from there, and that's going to be your width marker. And I checked with a lot of people. People were very generous in sending me photos of their butts. And the vast majority of people have this crease that then goes up to what I would generally consider to be the edge of their play zone on the side. So don't think about it in terms of, oh, it's this many inches out or it's this many hands or something like that, because it will vary based on how big someone is. But remember that it might feel like, oh, well, this person has like tons of flesh over here. I should be able to hit it. And it's like, well, no, their body might be bigger, but the relative play zone is still the same. It's still where on them does their crease end and go up from there. You don't get to hit like their hip just for funsies. Or conversely, if you're looking at someone that's much smaller, you can't think, oh, well, this isn't enough play space, so I want to hit out to the sides. Like, no, there is a specific play space and everyone's body will tell you where it is. You're taking your cues from their body. Position. Another important thing to consider is that when you change positions, your guides might shift. So when someone bends over, their skin stretches and there seems almost like there's more of it. And you might be tempted to hit the top of the butt because it looks like it's butt, but it's not. Similarly, if you're in diaper position and you have a low mark that's like as far as you're allowed to go low, it may not be where you think it is. So always recheck, think about things, think about how the skin has been stretched and where it is that you're still going to be allowed to play. And also by moving in these positions, you can expose extra skin and extra sensitive areas, which can be a positive or a negative, depending on how you want to look at it. Essentially what I'm saying is that it's a lot easier to see someone's play zone when they're standing up. Like you can see kind of how the flesh of the butt comes off of the pelvis. Okay, I'm just making gestures here. I don't know what I'm gesturing to. But there's a pelvis and then there's a butt. And when someone's standing, you can kind of see the crease of it. You can see where, all right, this is where I'm going to be working with. But when someone bends over, the skin all stretches out, the fatty tissue all stretches out, and it becomes a bit harder to tell. And I think a lot of people will often go too high when someone's bent over, or if you're in diaper position, go too low, just because you now have access to it. It's just a good thing to keep in mind. All right, a couple tricks for finding or marking your play zone. It's an old trope in spanking that a proper spanking is on the bare bottom. And while I think that there are plenty of proper spankings that can be given over any amount of clothing, I will say that in terms of finding your mark, clothing can make things a bit harder. Jeans in particular are really tricky because where the elements like belt loops and pockets and seams on them varies from jean to jean. And it can be difficult to tell what's under such a thick layer, particularly if they're loose fitting or like a men's cut. I would say when you're dealing with pants, if you're not sure on the play zone, hike the pants up so that you can clearly see the undercurve of the butt. That should give you at least a baseline. If the person is over my knee, I might also then be able to see where the top of their crack is. Remember, the play zone is below the top of the crack for almost everyone. And what I mean by hike it up is kind of like loop your finger into the belt loops and pull up like you're giving a wedgie, but just with the pants so that it fits snugly over the bum. And then you can see the contours of the bum and get an idea of where your zone is. With men, I might also do this with their underwear as well if they're wearing loose fitting boxers rather than snug briefs. Basically, all I'm trying to do is get the outline and the general curve of the butt. Now, that all said, while some clothing can make things harder, I am of the opinion that certain cuts of panties are absolutely the easiest way to see the play zone clearly. Really, any panties or underwear where you can wedgie them up a bit to expose the lower half of the butt cheek. Particularly if you're someone who tends to play too high, or you're like me and want to make sure that people don't play too high, panties can frame the butt really nicely. I used to actually exclusively wear cheeky cut panties to events because they were the perfect frame for my personal play zone. And when I was negotiating, I would always just literally show the person and say, like, anything not covered by my panties is fair game. But in reality, it's pretty easy to know when something is too low. You can almost always see where the crease is, where the butt ends and legs begin. So making sure you don't hit too low is simply a matter of hitting properly and making sure that you and your partner are on the same wavelength about thigh play. But where people tend to miss is by going too high or going too wide. So using underwear as a way to focus your attention on the lower half of the bottom can often be a good idea. As you can see on Katie's butt, this is focusing your attention on the lower bit of her bottom and keeping you from going too high. Also, they just frame the butt so wonderfully. Getting someone's play zone correct is not only about respecting someone's boundaries and making sure that they enjoy the spanking, but also about safety. There is no faster way to get a bottom to never want to play with you again than to not respect their play zone. If you miss-hit on me more than once, or I've told you my play zone and you are clearly ignoring it, I'm unlikely to ever play with you again. You want the bottom focusing on what's happening in the scene, not worrying about whether or not you're gonna miss-hit on them. Obviously, if you hit way too high, you're running risks with kidneys. Then you've got the bottom of the spine to contend with, as well as the tailbone. The reason that actually my play zone is so low is because I have a really low tailbone. So if you're using, say, a heavy wooden paddle and hit too high on me, it's very conceivable that you could crack my tailbone. And obviously that's not what we're after. Now, off to the sides, you've got hips, and many people will have nerve and muscle sensitivity in their hips that you don't want to be spanking on top of. Markings can also be an issue here. Even if you're someone who doesn't usually bruise from a spanking, you can often bruise from a miss-hit. I think the most obvious example of this is those pictures that you'll see sometimes of a really intense and aggressive marking and bruising after a spanking, and it looks like it's covering the whole butt. And then if you see the picture the next day, the area of the butt that's a proper play zone will be totally healed, and you'll have this sort of halo of bruising on the top and outside where the body clearly wasn't meant to be hit. So, in conclusion, bottoms, express yourself about your play zone if you have one that you think might be slightly different from how your top normally plays, whether that be that you like to play higher or lower or wider or narrower or whatever. You are allowed to decide where you are okay being hit. And if this isn't an issue for you, don't worry about it. Tops, just don't be a dick. If a bottom says that somewhere was too high or too low on them, that's not about you. It's not a personal attack. You aren't necessarily wrong broadly about where you've been hitting, but they are certainly right in the specific about their own body. Also, if you know you like to play outside of the standard zone, asking first is good practice. I like to play on tops of thighs and sometimes proper thighs, but that's a very personal thing, so I always ask before I play. Lastly, what to do if you miss. It's okay. It happens. If it fits the vibe of the scene, you can rub that spot out or press into it, which usually relieves pain, and you might just say, sorry, and move on. If it doesn't fit in the scene, you can usually just move on and try not to do it again. The key is to not try to gaslight the bottom into saying you didn't miss. If you're a bottom and someone continually disrespects your boundaries regarding your play zone, stop playing with them. You are well within your right to decide your own play area. Spanking should be fun, and as far as I'm concerned, playing in the zone is the fun way to do it. So that's it for play zones. Hopefully you have enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you would like to support this channel, you may come join us over on our Patreon. There will be links in the description box below, or you can purchase our merch, all the proceeds of which go towards the making of this channel. And thank you to Katie Jane for once again being willing to be my demo bottom. So, I'm Princess Kelly, this has been Spanking University, and until next time, class dismissed.